Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide and originator of a practice called Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift podcast. So thank you for joining. Funny, I missed last week and I was going to talk about this last week and I was away. It was the 4th of July and I was going to do it anyway. And where I was staying had no internet. So obviously I took the message to not do it. So here I am. And this is a really big topic and it comes up a lot. And I have this conversation with many that I know who do energy work and this kind of practice, because we actually deal with chronic issues and really and what I talk about are the deepest, darkest crumbs within the folds of our reality, right? And that's what really causes the chronic issues. So when we start looking at that kind of stuff, it's actually committing ourselves to flowing through it so we can resolve it once and for all. So time and time again, I have conversations with so many who I know who do this kind of work and who also work from this understanding, but also within ourselves, within ourselves and observing within ourselves and each other on why is it we will know that something helps us to get better, right? We know that doing something, changing certain things in our lives, changing certain practices and habits and everything will actually allow us to live in flow, right? Which is what we call wellness. And yet we will still avoid doing it, or we will actually go out of our way to avoid doing it because why, right? So many people scratch their heads and they say, why? We have a lot of deference that we have to giving the power of answer to other people outside of us, right? So we think the doctors have all the answers. We think that people we know have all the answers. Experts in their fields have all the answers. Except here's the thing. You are the expert of you. You alone know your journey, and therefore you alone have created the body, the situation, the environment that you have chosen in this life. So what happens is this: we bring forward things into this life that we might not necessarily be conscious of, but we carry certain patterns, right? So whether you want to look at it in a multi-life thing or in just a singular life thing, it doesn't matter. If we hold a certain pattern, if we practice a certain pattern in our lives, throughout our lives, we will continue to without resolving it, we'll continue to manifest and grow things that are messages from our higher self to say, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. And it always starts out really small and is a whisper. And then it's a pattern, and then it gets bigger. Then the message gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's what we call like an etheric 12 by 12 upside the head. Because then finally the higher self says, enough. This is holding us back from really attaining our potential on our journey. So why is it? So it's time to, hold on a second. I'm for some reason not seeing stuff here. That's very interesting. Huh. Anyway, oh, there we go. It just popped up a whole bunch of stuff. So I was like, I'm hearing dings that people are on, and then I didn't see anything. It just finally got up to itself. There we go. Good morning, Anna. And good morning, Laurel. Good morning, everybody's here. Anyhow, so here's the thing. When our messages get larger and larger and larger and louder and louder and louder, then we create different messages within ourselves. And one of our biggest message boards, hey, Ann, one of the biggest message boards we have in our lives are our bodies, our physical bodies. We created our physical bodies to be reminders in this density of separation on what it is for us to learn, that we want to set out to learn, to resolve, to complete, so that we can really flow forward and remember our divine wholeness, like while we're still in the body. So when I talk about the messages getting louder and louder, what happens more times than not is we get sick. We'll get sick. We'll have some injury. We'll have some kind of illness. And so then what happens, and what we've gotten into the habit of doing, is we then focus so much on alleviating the symptoms of the discomfort of whatever this illness or injury, chronic illness or situation, even, like, because it's not always physical, but we're talking today about the physicality in our bodies. So then we get so focused on the physicality and being uncomfortable, right? And how to alleviate that discomfort, that we forget that the whole sickness, the whole injury, the whole discomfort is all just a message of something else for us to look at, right? And sometimes it's really, really, like, well, not sometimes, often it's funny how actual literal it is. Because, like, people have back problems. Well, it's what burdens are you carrying, right? So think about carrying stuff on your back, right? So then, of course, your back's going to get tired, it's going to get disjointed and all that kind of stuff. We have all kinds of stuff like that. And when we start looking at things from the perspective of everything in our bodies is that shows up as a representative of something else, then we stop saying, okay, well, I'm going to put all my energy to alleviating this discomfort. And we then shift our energy to, okay, so let me look at this in my wholeness so that I come back to wholeness and flow. And when I come into flow, then I will naturally be happy and healthy and free of disease, free of illness. And I can move forward and I can then really enjoy my life. So many of us will, like, we get into this and this is how I work. This is how I function with myself and with clients and students and whatever. So the key is this. It's absolutely great to find something that's going to alleviate the symptom, as long as it's not the crutch of simply putting off or denying yourself the opportunity to resolve, to look at what it is that the message is giving you, right? To look at it straight on so that you can let it go, so you can resolve it, and then you won't need that anymore, right? Now, some people will say, oh, no, I have this. I am diabetic. I am this. When we start saying that, we make it even more sticky, because then we incorporate it into our identity, and then we won't let go of it because we say, well, it's part of my identity, so therefore I have to hold on to it, or else who will I be, right? And there's no judgment on this. This is how we have gotten to working. And we've gotten to such a place of externalization and not listening to our inner self and our bodies, of, like, that we forget to say, okay, this is a temporary thing. We forget to say, where is this coming from? And we just say, oh, well, the doctor told me I'm going to have this the rest of my life. I'm going to be on this medication the rest of my life, blah, 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 blah. And I've had so many people come to me over the 10 years I've been doing this, 9 years, whatever it is. What are we? 8 years, 8.5 years that I've been doing this full time. That people come to me, and usually they're the one, like, and this is what I love. I love it when somebody comes to me and says, I've had the doctors tell me I will never change this, and I know I can, so help me do it. Because we can. And the first step is acknowledging I have created my reality and I can change it. So when we go into this place of self-empowerment, right? This ties all the way back to why it is so crucial and so important and core for us to focus on self-love, self-nourishment, self-acceptance, self-empowerment. Because when we can fully take responsibility for our creation of our reality, then we can easily take the power. We can stand in the power of changing it. And so everybody says, oh, yeah, I did self-love. Like, they did it on a checklist on last Sunday afternoon. But in separation and density, what we have learned over such a long span of repeated experiences has been this exclusion and limitation and feeling ourselves as exclusionary and limited and separate, right? Which means then we feel like we are in lack in some way. And part of the game here now, is my understanding, is that we're coming to this place of remembrance to say, you know what? I am separate and I'm a whole, and I'm all part of all of it simultaneously, so I can change all of it. And I have worked with a number of people who have come to me and said, yeah, I don't don't buy this. I don't buy that the doctor told me this. I don't buy that these people told me this, or that this is how it goes, and that I believe I can change it. And then they have. So the key to that is when we say, I can change this, when we say, all right, I'm going to accept that I can change this, what is really, really important is the commitment to say, in changing this, I commit myself to let go of those things that don't serve me, that are causing me to manifest this in my reality. So that alone can scare the ego tremendously, because many times we will hold on to a certain pattern. So for example, let me think of a good one. Well, so maybe there's a core belief of unworthiness, right? Well, that's pretty much comes, I always say, is like 2 steps to unworthiness, no matter where we look at, especially in this like representation of separation. But then we say, okay, so I don't feel like I'm worthy of having an easy life, right? And what if for whatever reason you might have brought it in that way, somebody could have told you that and convinced you that, and that you believed it, and that's part of the lesson you chose in this life or in many lives, right? And if we can say, I have to have it hard, well, then you're going to do, like, at any level of consciousness, you're going to do everything to align yourself to have a hard life. And if you believe in things like, or you believe what other people tell you, or you believe from other experience, I have to work really hard. I have to work 4 times as hard as everybody else to get half as far, which was one I had that I did resolve a long time ago. And many of us have that. Well, then we're always going to feel like we're struggling in the uphill battle all our lives. And things will manifest in our life to say, okay, well, I'm creating this, but to get there, I have to work really hard, and I have to do all these things and put all the sacrifice in there to do it, including sometimes getting sick, overcoming a handicap, overcoming, a debilitating sickness. And when we get to this place of saying, okay, I'm going to just say, I don't need this anymore, then we can start to unravel all of the energy that we're holding into our bodies, holding into our realities, that are causing us to create those realities that reflect back to us with that actual confirmation of the belief that we have, right? So once we change it, then we can change everything else. We will find ways to break free of the patterns so that we can change it. So I've worked with people with cancer who come to me and they're like, well, I was told that I was going to die X amount of years ago, and I'm still here. And so, like, one person came to me and they're like, well, and it's now just become a sort of a chronic thing instead of a terminal thing. And every time it comes back, it's like a little less, it's a little lighter, and it's a little easier to manage and whatever. And the person was like, well, I'm ready to just be done with it. And I'm like, cool. Well, and just like poking and prodding in a couple of sessions, we actually got to the core of what caused that in that individual to begin with. Cancer is a chronic thing. When we look at it energetically, it is a chronic thing, because cancer takes a long time to become limiting to us. And we have cells in our body all the time that collect toxins. And so those are the potential cancer cells, right? So they collect toxins so that our body can stay free of them and they can be flushed out of the system. But when we hold in too many toxins, then it collects and then it mutates and then it becomes cancer or tumors or whatever you want to call it. So think about that, right? If we look at it from that really simplistic perspective, well, what would help us to resolve cancer? And it's not fighting it, because fighting it puts a bunch of resistance to it. And you might get rid of it today, but you'll have a much higher recurrence if you don't resolve what it is that caused you to hold that resistance, that anger, the toxic energy or emotion that allowed you to create that. Now, funny thing, a lot of people say, well, there's environmental concerns that have to do with toxins too. Right, but if we didn't believe that we were unworthy of having a clear environment, or having a body that functioned perfectly, besides what we do inside, we're going to create outside of us the stuff that will put a detriment to our body too. So it's almost like we give ourselves a 1-2 to ensure that we're going to be limited or punished in some way with a big message of what to look at that's going to be really loud, right? So, so what's interesting is that we'll say that I want to get rid of this. So like I said, so cancer is one chronic thing. We have so many different chronic things, diabetes, like chronic diseases of all kinds, allergies even, right? Allergies, right? So worked with somebody once who had an irritation and allergy to a very specific kind of tree. And when we went and sort of delved in to resolve it, I saw, like in another life, that this person was hung from that kind of tree, and therefore they held this resistance to it. And once we resolved, forgave, apologized, accepted, all that kind of stuff, the allergy went away. I mean, seriously, this stuff happens and we can do it, except that we get so myopic and we've gotten so externalized and so in a box of this is how it has to happen, this is what it has to look like, that when we say this is what it has to look like, then we create it that way and say, well, I'm going to have this the rest of my life, and you keep on saying it, well, then you're going to create that. So the funny thing is, like, you would think that all of us are like, okay, well, let me just change that and all that kind of stuff. So why do we avoid doing the things that are actually going to make us feel better, right? So often, so we can look at the very physical 3D stuff. So when somebody gets really sick, what's the first thing often we look at these days is diet, lifestyle, things like that. What's in their environment, what could be poisoning them, what could also be, a detriment to them. We look at the electronics, we look at, the quality of the food that they're ingesting. And so, we say, all right, well, let's start with that, right? So the funny part about that is this. Often that doesn't work for long term, because it'll often happen where they'll do it for a short period of time, right? Because they're motivated, because they want to get better. They don't like feeling sick. They don't want to die. They're afraid of dying. Like, there's fear motivating them. And then when something starts to subside or it starts getting tiresome, they're like, okay, well, I'll slack off on this week, or I'll slack off on this week. And what's really important to understand is, if we don't go back and look underneath at the emotions and energies and the beliefs underneath, then we will continue to, then we will find a way to sabotage ourselves, right? Because underneath, if we're saying, well, I don't deserve to live, I don't deserve to be healthy, I don't like, or I have to have it this way, or I have to learn lessons through this kind of sickness, which is a very familial thing, right? So, someone I was talking to yesterday, degenerative arthritis in the family. I want to talk about irritation. Well, let's have a family irritation to a family message, a lesson, set of lessons of learning lessons through, being debilitated through irritation that's manifested in the body. And that happens with a lot of people, right? So you can say, well, yeah, okay, well, if I commit to really looking at that stuff, because what happens is when this stuff is in our bodies, say we're having an arthritis like flare up, right? Then there's nothing else you can look at. And there's a big honking neon sign in front of you, right? So when you have that going on, then like really what the intent of the higher self is to say, why do I have this flare up? Why am I uncomfortable? What is like irritated within me that I'm not looking at, or that I'm repressing, so that it's manifesting in my body? So yes, we want to, of course, focus on alleviating how it feels. But so that we can function. And that's where I always say these kind of very Western 3D practices actually do marry very well with holistic stuff when the situation arises. Because if we commit ourselves to resolving the underlying cause of why we are creating this in our reality, then we can use those tools that we've created, right? And it's all kinds of tools, holistic and allopathic, all kinds of all kinds of tools that we have, right, that are external. Like, I can use that until I remember how to access that wellness and wholeness and flow within me, which will be the resolution and the dispersal, which is sort of the term of the week. If you want to watch my other podcast with my friend Sarah, it's on, it's up there. It's called The Ascended World, that we talked about the dispersal thing. But if we disperse these things, we can be in a different state of wellness, and we can be in a different state of wholeness, and we can change any familial agreements, what I call soul agreements, on learning lessons a certain way. I actually had somebody come to me. I had somebody come to me once who, it was very interesting. They had noticed a pattern, which was very aware of them. They had noticed a pattern in their life, in their family, of people around them, including siblings, dying at a very early age with young kids, right? So like, I don't know, I think her brother had died at 28 with like 3 kids or 2 kids or something like that. And then like her cousin and this and this and this, and she's like, and I am, or in 30 something, I don't know. And then she came to me and she was like, yeah, I want to break this pattern. I'm like, okay, so we say that. So here's the thing, when we start talking about all these like things, when we want to resolve them, often it's the ego saying, I want to resolve the pain and discomfort, right? But what's really uncomfortable to the ego is to say, and I will resolve what's causing me to create this pain and discomfort in my reality, because, and it's very uncomfortable, because it's usually something that the ego holds close, has deep hurt, deep pain, deep fear, unresolved stuff from this life or other lives, unresolved beliefs from this life or other lives, and it feels uncomfortable by having to look at it. So the funny thing is, you know, like when somebody comes to me and says they really want to change something that's debilitating in their life, I say, so are you really ready to commit to it? Because committing to it means, and when I say this, it sounds easy. When committing to it means committing to remembering your place of wholeness and unconditional self-love, which means we are going to look at a whole lot of things that are not that. We're going to look at the voice that tells you you're fake, or that you're unworthy. The only way you're worthy is if you do this, or if you act this way, or you fill this role, or you do this kind of stuff. And we're going to spend time really focusing on flowing through that, resolving it, completing it within yourself, seeing what the lesson was if you need to, and then moving on, so that you don't have to hold on to that anymore, because all of that is what causes you to manifest this. So you might see a big difference right away. It might actually get a little more crazy and irritated for a while, but the key is to be committed to flowing through this, because at the end you will find that wellness, that flowing, that much better place. Now, sometimes we choose terminal illnesses because we need to just complete a lesson and then be done with it. And what I tell people too is terminal illnesses are not like the pass or fail is not if you live or die, because dying isn't a bad thing. Dying is a graduation, right? So sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to finish this. The key is to finish it and then to pass on. If like you are ready to pass on, to finish the lessons that you wanted to learn that caused you to manifest that to begin with, then to pass on without the need to come back and repeat it again. So it's like, there's a lot of different elements, and you know, to be able to pass on in peace is a really nice, beautiful thing, versus doing so in angst and fear and anger or whatever. And then, of course, as I understand it, coming back to repeat the lesson so that you can resolve it the next time. And many times we don't, but only we know our own journeys. And so, like I said, I've worked with so many to really change things that everybody says that they can't change. But the key is this, like I've also watched people get to a certain point of discomfort and they say, this is enough. Well, we're in a really big habit of saying this is enough. Oh yeah, I did enough. I did enough. I did enough so that I feel a little better. And then we think, the ego says, oh no, that's okay. That's enough. We don't have to go and look in that uncomfortable, like dark closet anymore. When really what'll happen is it's just a temporary stay. It's just showing you like, okay, look, we can make it better. And the more we resolve, the better it's going to get. But when we say it's enough, that's another worthiness thing. When we say, well, I'm only worthiness of having so good of an experience, or if I'm too healthy or too happy or life is too easy, I won't have the human experience, and I won't be able to connect with others around me, and I'll be alone. And there's all this kind of stuff that's underneath it, right? There's so many layers of psychology underneath all of this, from the ego and what we believe. So the keys are to get to those things, and to get to those things are to commit to that self-love, right? To changing our habits and practices and words and thoughts to all of that, which everybody said, like somebody say, oh yeah, well, that's all fluffy and woo-woo stuff. And it's like, no, because when we come from a place of self-love and acknowledging that we are divine, acknowledging that we are infinite and responsible for our creation, and we can accept within ourselves in that love and wholeness that, yeah, I chose to have that chronic illness. I chose to be in that abusive relationship. I chose to have this kind of situation because I believed this, without judgment, to say, yeah, okay, now I completed that and now I can change it. One of the things that I find really debilitating are the practices that say, I can't change something within them, right? An addiction or whatever. Well, you can change that. Because the key is to look at why you had the addiction to begin with. Like, what was that belief like underneath, and why would you create the physicality or the chemistry that would cause your body to say, I have this tendency to? We can change all of that, right? But it's so uncomfortable to so many. So that's the thing, is I've watched so many get to a certain point and they say this is enough. And then they're really good for a little while, and then it starts to go downhill again, right? They'll be good for a little while because they've cleared up a bunch of stuff to a certain level, but they haven't really gotten to the deeper parts. And then they're just like, okay. Or they've brought it up and sort of just let it sit there at the surface. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm looking at it. Yeah, I'm not ready to let go of it. And that's okay too. And that'll improve the situation often. And then it starts to degrade. The situation might start to degrade. Well, as they start to degrade, then there's these thoughts of, oh, well, see, that didn't work, right? And then they default into, oh, I'm just going to let doctors take care of me, or I'm going to do this kind of treatment, or I'm going to go looking for some kind of treatment that can help me, instead of going back to saying, oh, hey, I still didn't resolve everything that caused me to manifest this to begin with. Okay, so I sort of let that on the surface, and now it came up to the surface, and it sort of, became a little poisonous to my physical body, which again, cancer often, and chronic illness. So let me go back and really recommit myself to finishing that resolution. So many times I talk to people that they sort of have this bout or a second bout or like a relapse or whatever. And then I'll be like, so have you been continuing? Like, my first question will be, are you continuing to do your self-work? Are you self-focusing and looking at flowing through this to a different place, and seeing what it is that's holding you in this pattern and whatever? And like 99 times out of 100, well, not 99, maybe 19 out of 20 times I'll hear no, I stopped because I've been focusing on finding a treatment that'll help. And I'm like, but this is the treatment that will help. So this is something for us to really sit on and chew on and accept, because we're the ones that create this reality and we can change it. But to do that is to really acknowledge all of the reality, including the dark shadows and the biggest cracks and crevices, and saying, okay, so let me see them in a place where I can accept it, free of judgment, so that I can then incorporate this all back into my whole, instead of pushing it away in the closet, right? The skeletons in the closet kind of idea. That causes me then to be toxic within myself and in my environment, and having that reflect back to me, so that I can really just move forward and actually have an even better experience for the rest of this physical representation and embodiment. So, and to know that I can finish like my lessons in a place, learning lessons from a place of love and joy and fun and expansion and prosperity. And I no longer have to learn my lessons through sickness and limitation and fear and anger. And what a nice way to change and maybe finish out even having to incarnate here, because then you're just like, okay, I got this. So things to think about this week. What in your life has been a chronic thing? What has been a part of your reality for a long time that you've just sort of accepted as a necessary evil, that you just have accepted it and saying, yeah, okay, I got this, right? And put it in front of you and say, so I can change this. And if I am the creator of my reality, and I am, and it's here, what is it showing me that I'm ignoring? Because that can be like and commit to yourself that self-love, that acceptance, that forgiveness, so that you can see it and resolve it and complete it once and for all. And if you need help, let me know. But the whole thing, there's many different ways of doing that, but the key is to commit to yourself, because you're worth it. You're totally worth it, because you're me and I'm you, and we're divine. We're the divine consciousness of this wholeness. And so part of this journey is remembering that we're already there, and that we can change and be this incredible, infinitely powerful creator, and shift our reality on a dime. And I've seen it, and I see it more and more, and it's really incredible when you say, okay, change that, and it changes. And that's what happens when we're in that flow and in that self-empowerment and that authenticity and acceptance and self-responsibility. So look at that and see what things in your body and your reality are part of, like, that you say, I have this. I am diabetic. I am old. That's another one. Oh, I hear that all the time, right? People say, I'm old and I can't help it. And I'm like, why do you believe that? Our bodies are continually regenerating. Even scientists have said they don't understand why we degrade, because our cellular structure really is such that we could live for a really long, an indeterminate amount of time, but we allow these things to break us down. They're our messages, right? So old is just an idea. It's a belief. And then when we tell ourselves that and we say, oh, my body has to degrade. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, well, my whole family had arthritis, so I did. My whole family had arthritis. I have none. I'm 50 now, right? And I remember, like, when I was young, all I ever heard was, oh, wait till you're in your 40s, wait till you hit 40, and then, the arthritis starts kicking in, and I'm like, nothing, right? Because I resolved all that kind of stuff. And yeah, do I have stuff that shows up? I do. But then I look at it as a really loud message, because I've committed to myself to resolve and complete and be whole and be beyond holding these kind of limitations in my reality, so that I don't have to manifest physical illness or injury to see a message. So I've committed to that. And for the most part, I do that. So if something does show up in my body, I'm like, whoa, there's a big honking neon sign. What is it that I'm not looking at? And so we ask, why do we not look at it? Why do we not look at it right away? Why do we avoid and just like put off looking at something, or until it explodes on us or becomes like this emergent situation? And it's like, well, it's a habit and discomfort of the ego, and not remembering that we can change it, and that and being afraid. Actually, usually it's fear, right? So once we embrace ourselves in that nourishment and that infinite power, that we can say, okay, so let me just go ahead and change that from this place of nourishment and no fear. Like, I can change things. And by the way, when we stop being afraid of dying, then we stop being motivated to like avoid all these things because we're afraid of dying. We're like, okay, well, let me look at this. Oh, okay, well, that could potentially kill me, but I can also change this so that doesn't. And then, well, that changes the energy and the way things can move and shift and heal. Like, what we call healing is really just remembering this. So do that in your reality this week. It's really important. It's just so core. And when we look at those things that are chronic in our lives and realize we can change them, it just enables us to really stand in that authentic divine power even more. So on that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for joining me. Have a great week. This is Angela Coulter with Living the Shift. Have a good one.